live, but everyone hasn't joined yet. Now we're actually live on Instagram. Hey everyone, Kristen Thomas here for SupConnect. This is SupConnect Live. We do this every Thursday. I get to talk with interesting people in the world of paddling, more specifically, usually stand-up paddleboarding. It does go immediately, if you have some friends who miss it, right on to IGTV on SupConnect's channel, and then it will be on YouTube later, both SupConnect and mine, KT Outside. Hey, today, this guy's being a really good sport because he just got done with a huge event. The athletes, I believe, wrapped up 2 days ago. That great Alabama 650. So I don't know if he's still in Alabama wrapping things up or back home, but we will get to talk to Greg Wingo today. Rome Projects is his company that does some really interesting, fascinating events. Especially excited about the one coming up called Last Paddler Standing. So we'll talk about both of those and, of course, his story. Looks like he's here. Yes, bring him right on. So love learning people's backgrounds themselves and how they got interested. There he is. And where are you? I forgot to ask because I know you just wrapped up a huge event.
I'm in Birmingham. I'm still in Alabama. This is where I live.
Oh, you live in Alabama. Okay.
I do.
I should have known that. I knew you were in the South somewhere, but you do move around for what you do. So fascinating what you do. Ultras, they're being called now.
Yes.
Marathons, ultras. I guess the one you just finished up being the longest of all of them. I know it's a multi-sport one. Is that right?
This, the Great Alabama 650 it's the longest paddle race in the United States. Now it is multiple disciplines within the paddling sphere, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But it's the second longest in the world and the longest in the United States. It's a 10-day race over 650 miles.
Wow. That's just such a wild thought.
Yeah.
But let's back up first and talk about you. Is water your background? Outdoorsman? What's your story?
My background is in ultra running and race directing. And so I come into it, fortunately in the paddling world, I come into it with maybe a little bit of a different perspective than a lot of other race directors. I do paddle and I do it frequently and have a lot of fun doing it, but I'm not an endurance paddler, but I do other endurance sports. And so when I'm creating a race, I'm oftentimes able to bring some really, I think there's some pretty cool new ideas to paddling in general, and maybe change things up a little bit from what has been sort of the historic way that races have occurred.
Yes, well, the new one coming up in December is definitely creative and definitely different than anything we've seen before. So that is exciting. So interesting that you would choose stand-up paddleboarding to focus on for that one. As you said, the one that just wrapped up is multidiscipline, and I do want to hear more about that and stories. I didn't see results, so I'm not sure if you had stand-up paddleboarders actual finishing this time or.
No, unfortunately, we've not had a lot of luck with paddleboarders that are focused on that discipline. We do have people that will do sections of the race on a board. And our very first year, we did have a well-known endurance paddleboarder, Scott Bast, actually get about a third of the way through the race. And so, but we haven't been able to sort of crack that endurance paddleboarder market, I guess you could say, with the 650. And I won't lie, that was a pretty big reason why I wanted to create the race in December. Was I wanted to get around more of those long distance paddleboarders and really sort of not only give them something that was different than the 650, but also get some feedback from them on what they're interested in when it comes to doing these longer distance races.
Yeah. Well, I'm wearing my Chattajack shirt. That's next weekend, and that's one of the more accessible and well-known in the U.S. Not nearly as long a distance, but it's been going for quite a while. They have an amazing, I've only done it once, but that's one that I have done. So since I don't have a Last Paddler Standing shirt at this point in time,
Soon.
thought I'd wear this one. But it's interesting. I'm hearing more and more about ultras, about distance paddling. Our friend, I don't know if you had a chance today to see Chris Parker, did announce that he's someone who's fascinated himself personally with ultras, has done the Yukon 1000, or maybe the other Yukon, but he, I know, talked about the Ultra League. I've seen writing from Sup World Ranking, where he talks about we should have actually a definition of this and where it might start. He suggested 32 kilometers, which is pretty short again for these ultras, but might be kind of the beginning of a marathon type event. But it's just so interesting to talk about all these things. But Chris, the article today was that Sup Racer is back. He was able to sell what he needed to do to keep it going, and he's still a part of it. So I think we're going to hear more from him about ultras, about your ultra coming up, about again, because it's creative and unique and different. But the Great Alabama 650, before we leave that, how long has that been going on? About how many paddlers do you have?
So this was the fourth year of the race. We were very fortunate that we were able to happen all through the pandemic. When you're doing a really big race like that, where everybody gets spread out pretty quickly, you can survive a pandemic that is all about people not being close to each other. So we were able to have the race in 2020 and 2021 when a lot of races weren't happening. So this is the fourth year. The race, most of these really long distance races, some of the ones that you mentioned, like the Yukon 1000, a lot of these races are smaller by design, and in terms of the number of paddlers. And there's a variety of reasons. One reason being that we're still a little bit of a niche area within the sport, and so we're still growing that with the number of paddlers, and it's definitely not as big as some of the other areas. But another reason is the bigger these races are, the more the logistics involved with them, and really, quite frankly, I would say the greater degree that you're focused on safety, focused on the experience, and every boat you add to one of these races exponentially increases the difficulty level of putting on the race. And so the 650 tends to have anywhere from 10 to 17 or 18 boats per year in the race, and that's male solo, female solo, and tandem. Sex doesn't matter. And so that makes it a little bit different than a lot of the other races out there, because the categories are not based on type of boat you're using or length or anything like that, or even nothing like that it comes into play. It's strictly about solo and tandem. And additionally, in the 650, you can change out the vessels that you use. So when I mentioned earlier that we see a paddleboard get used, very oftentimes it's an inflatable that's being used in a section of the rapids by maybe someone who doesn't want to take their surf ski or their OC1 through a class 4 rapid, and so they'll hop on an inflatable and ride that down. And so that's where we do see it commonly used during the race. But it's sort of a unique thing within this race that the racers are allowed to change out throughout.
That's great. I think that is super interesting, and does, you've talked about unique and the experience of these. There's a lot that goes into your side, of course, but the whole mindset that is needed, not only that physical ability of endurance athletes, but when we talk about Last Paddler Standing, the strategy, the plan, I guess, in 650 also, if you can change craft, how are you going to do that? When are you going to do that? How the logistics of all of that really make it so much more fascinating than just your standard 10K or something like that, where, yeah, there's a few things you need to be sure to take care of, but boy, there's a lot more when you're going the long distance. So we'll talk some more about the mental game. One thing I'm really fascinated with as a promoter and somebody putting on these events is you've made some amazing connections. I think you told me um, it's an outdoor organization or something that kind of sponsors this type of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The Alabama Scenic River Trail is
Cool.
the organization in the state of Alabama that is tasked with promoting our waterways, both to people in Alabama, but also to people around the world. And so the organization actually came to me several years back and said, can you create a race on our original scenic river trail that is the 650-mile long trail, which just also happens to be the longest river trail in one state in the country. And
Oh,
so,
cool.
that's sort of how it all came about. It was this idea that, if we create this world-class event that gets a lot of attention, then that's going to be a great way to get in the minds of people that might want to come here and paddle. And Alabama is kind of conveniently located to lots of Northerners and Midwesterners that are making their way to the beach anyway. We're sort of a pass-through state. And what we wanted to do was basically get people to stop if they were passing through and hit all these waterways. We're full of rivers and lakes and things like that that are really top notch. And so the race was really what was created to be able to show that off.
Yeah, oh, that's wonderful, and it is great to know that. I talk to so many people about wanting to, whenever we see water, wanting to go and paddle it, and but there's water that people don't know about, like this 650-mile trail. That's amazing,
Right.
through the state of Alabama. So all of you guys listening now, you do know, and those of you who drive through Alabama, you've got to stop to
Definitely.
do some paddling there. Fantastic. Jeff, I don't know if I know Jeff's last name. Instagram's always says hello to you, Greg.
Hey, Jeff.
Connect. Wild Mother Supper. I love that. The names are awesome on Instagram. So that's great that they back that. So switch gears. First annual Last Paddler Standing. It's going to be at Henderson Park. Unfortunately, but I think everything's okay. That was in Florida where they just
Yeah.
had the hurricane go through. Um, but I guess if you're already about water, perhaps water is not as intimidating. Or from what I hear, there wasn't any damage. But a very unique event. So let's start talking about Last Paddler Standing and your vision for it and what it will look like for these paddlers who have signed up.
Yeah, so Last Paddler Standing, like you said, is taking place at Nathan Benderson Park in Sarasota, Florida. It starts December 3rd at 9 a.m. and it can go pretty much as long as it lasts. I mean, there's no defined end time to it, and that's something I guess I'll talk about a little bit. But yeah, it's taking place in December. We've got some racers from all over the world that are coming in to do this, and it's really there's a few things about the race that make it unique within the paddling world. One of them is that there is no way to really know right now when it's going to end, because it goes until everybody quits but one racer, and so it could last a few hours. It could last all week. I really don't want it to last all week, because I put on a 10-day race and I know what that feels like to put it on for that long. But if we get two paddlers that are really competing against each other at the end, there's no telling how long it'll last. And then the other thing that makes it really interesting, I think, is this, the fact that it is probably the most gender equaling race in all of paddle sports. It has nothing to do with power and speed, really, for the most part, and everything to do with strategy and basically your ability to have some good endurance and stamina. And so That's got nothing to do with male or female. So it's really exciting because we don't have to have a male and female category as a result of that. This is truly the last paddler that survives it. And so I'm super excited about that because, I think that that's something that we have needed in this sport. It exists in other sports and other races in other sports. And so I think it's exciting that that's something that I'm going to get to be able to bring to the paddling world.
Very cool. Yes. So 9 a.m. Well, if it's okay, I'd love to talk about some of the races too, because you've been introducing them on your Instagram. So everybody besides the Greg Wingo, you also want to follow Last Paddler Standing, which is also an Instagram account. But what does it look like? What happens at 9 o'clock when they all start together? What is the format?
So the concept is it is a 3.33 mile loop within the park. And on the hour, every hour, you paddle that loop. So you have a full hour to finish that 3.33 miles. And for most people, they're going to be able to finish that well under an hour. At the top of the next hour, that loop starts again. So you have to be back at the start line. There's a countdown, and then everybody goes and does it again. And this continues on as people are quitting or they're timing out because they get tired or, a variety of reasons really. But basically, it just keeps going on the hour, every hour on this loop. And then at 48 hours, if we get to 48 hours, the loop actually increases in distance to right around 5 miles. And so the thinking is if paddlers have been able to sort of hang on for 48 hours, this is going to be something that'll start to drive people out. It'll be a good bit harder to finish it, with each hour at that point. And so really what it comes down to is like I said, strategy. Do you paddle it in 35 minutes and spend 25 minutes resting and eating? Or do you paddle it in, let's say, 52 minutes and, go slower, but only have about 8 minutes or so time on the land? And so it's going to be interesting to see how that all comes into play with all the different racers.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Can't wait to see that. So you have some well-known names, I know, for us, and like you said, international people flying in for this. I've actually interviewed a couple and met some of them. A Scandinavian, I think you have. I have not met Goran before, but it sounds like he's got a background of doing some. Maybe one of the big European ones that's well-known is the 11 City Tour, the 5-day event, or now they do it straight, is one of the options. I'm guessing maybe he's done that one before.
He has. He just did it. I guess it was last month. And yeah, we've got a smattering of Europeans that are coming over. Joran's one of those that's coming over. Paolo Marconi's coming over from Italy.
Oh, wow.
And then probably somebody a lot of your people would know from a recent interview is Brendan Prince. Is also coming over to do it. And so, those are just a few of the sort of the international paddlers that we have. I mentioned Scott Bast, who is, well known in the endurance subworld. He is coming up from the Keys to do it. And as a wild card, I've got Bobby Johnson in it, who just won the 650. So this is somebody who isn't normally on a board, but is probably right now the best solo endurance surf ski paddler in the world. So he's coming to give it a try because this, the endurance thing is right in his wheelhouse.
Very cool. It's such a neat intersection because it's not just racers, it's adventurers and distance paddlers who aren't necessarily in race mode, but don't have to be, at least for that first 48 hours. It's more about that strategy and endurance, and you don't have to be, and maybe don't want to be going full speed. So for instance, Brendan, who's gone all the way around the UK and set a record in this many day adventure, that he doesn't call a race is coming to this event. So very cool that you're getting that crossover. Yeah. And some other favorites. You have Patrick from up in the Northeast coming down, Banfo Paddle Sports, and Tracy, um, female.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely excited to have Tracy in this as well. And you mentioned both Patrick and Tracy were early entrants to this race, and I think that's something that definitely I would love to touch on just for a second. Is um, you know oftentimes racers will wait until after the first year of a race to sort of see how it goes before they're willing to commit to something. I think what I've been very fortunate with is, if you have a really good concept and you are able to sort of communicate that well, then you can get some really great paddlers to agree to come to your race. And Patrick and Tracy were both two that from the very beginning signed up to come take this on, and so that's super exciting for me. And I think I am fortunate that I have the 650 as something that shows that I have the ability to put on some tough events.
Yeah.
So I think that that's good, but the paddleboarding world doesn't really know me, and so so it needed to be a concept that was exciting enough that people would want to sign up. And I think also too, the other thing to keep in mind with this is, yes, we want to see who can last the longest. I think that's great. That's certainly the whole concept of the race. But also, we want people to sign up because they want to see what they can do. They want to see how many hours they can go. You may not be signing up in order to be the last paddler standing, but you might be interested to see what 10 hours of paddling and then getting off the water and then paddling and then getting off the water, what that does, what's that feel like? And a lot of people don't know what that feels like. And so I'm curious to see if more people want to sign up strictly just to see what the challenge is for them. So that's definitely another aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point. Well, you made a couple. One is I do wish people would jump in earlier and not wait for second years of things. This one, I'm sure this is very interesting and we'll keep going, but we have had in the past people who do wait and then they miss opportunities that were really special for one reason or another. That's something. So jump in while you can. But I love the idea that you don't have to be the person to go till the end. It's a personal challenge. So there's a lot of you out there that would probably love to see how you can do with this new format, because it is something really different to stop each hour and have that rest and decide how much rest you want to have and how does your body work with that. And you might find that you're possibly super, like you said, this is really leveling a playing field in so many ways, because it's not just about speed and power. It's about strategy. It's about your mind game, about your ability to endure. So love that. So people listening, you should jump in, even if you thought it wasn't for you, but you don't have to be that person that goes the very last. Maybe you already know you don't want to do more than 24 hours, but you can join and do that, right?
Yeah, and I think that, to go back to an earlier point that you made, these figuring out what is termed an ultra distance and seeing more of those events start to pop up is important, because there are very old established ultra endurance races within the paddling world. I mean, if you think about Texas Water Safari is a race that's been around for 60 years. If you think about Yukon River Quest that you mentioned that Christopher has done and loves, that race has been around for forever as well. And so what I think is really important is finding where that bridge is between where lots of paddlers are right now and getting them to that point where they feel comfortable and confident in doing some of these longer distance races. And the beautiful thing about Last Paddler Standing is it is an endurance race, but it really is also about what your endurance is. It's not about a set distance that I've got to go out and do. It's about finding out what I can do personally from an endurance standpoint. And that might only be, 10, 15 miles. But if you typically only race 1 and 3 mile races, 10 and 15 miles is a pretty big step up in distance. And so that's definitely something that I want people to take away from it is this is, for a lot of people, just a really good opportunity to move into that endurance area of the sport.
Love that. Love that. You also have, you're talking about leveling the playing field in terms of gender, but you have over 70, somebody who's older. So quite a range of ages, I understand.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that is very common just in endurance sports in general, whether we're talking running or cycling or paddling. What we see is that older athletes tend to do pretty well within the endurance world, and so it's been the case in ultra running for years and years and years, and it's definitely the case within many of the endurance paddle sports. I think a prime example is Sally O'Donnell, who has won the female solo category every year of the Great Alabama 650, turned 63 during the race this year, and she is hands down the best endurance female paddler in the world. There's nobody better than her. She's 63 years old.
Wow.
So so I think that that's obviously playing out in my starting list for last paddler standing as well. Like you said, we do have racers as old as 70, and paddling is something that is definitely a sport that's easier to be able to do later into life, and I think that it's awesome that we're going to have people in their 20s and people in their 70s, and they are they're competing for the exact same thing.
Yeah. Well, as an older paddler myself, I've always said one thing that we have is often that mental game. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm. No, you're fine.
So what got you to decide stand-up was really the right choice? Oh, and prone, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For this event.
So in thinking about all the different styles of paddling, stand-up was the one that really stood out as being kind of the one that would most fit with this very finite amount of time of 1 hour per loop. When you're on a board, you can easily get on and off of that. We see that obviously with the way that so many of the races that you're at and that I'm at, whether we're at Carolina Cup or whether you're at one of the ICF events or something like that, we see what that process is of a racer being able to quickly hop on the board, get out on the water, quickly get off the board, dismount, run through a finish line, whatever that is. That's not as easy to do within the other disciplines of paddling. And so when it is very possible that it's coming down to a matter of seconds, with a clock being what's occurring, a paddleboard is the best way to do that. That's one thing. The other thing is I just identified that that's an area of paddling where we're not seeing quite as many endurance opportunities. You do see it with some of the other endurance races that they have a stand-up category. If you're talking about the Yukon 1000, you're doing it on a board, but you're doing it with somebody else. But you can do that, but it's not really. It loses a little bit of its individual drive when you're having to partner with somebody on a long distance race. And so I wanted to create something that was going to be specific to stand up that was a long distance event. And so this format just naturally fit that because it isn't a controlled setting. It is something where, quite frankly, the board and the type of board you use is not, it's important, but it's not critical like it would be in, something like the graveyard. It's a completely different sort of thing. And so now we're getting into an area where it really does come down to the person and not what they're using. And again, it seems like that's something that just translates well with stand up.
Yeah. It's of course the first time, but one of the things we love is the paddling community, is other people. So while we're going to events competing, we love to be with others. So I love this opportunity that's a little longer where we can get to know the people involved, where they will probably have some time with each other. Even again, they're competing against each other, but that time off water creates some really unique, I think, opportunities. You'll be able to talk to them about how is it going in those laps in between, because they're not out, away from things in the water. So really excited about all the different opportunities. I think it's going to be really fun to watch. It sounds, it's really long, but you can check in and out, or maybe you'll stay up all night too. I don't know, and watch how it's going, because it allows you to talk to the participants off the water as well as on the water. I think that'll be fun. It almost reminds me of, even when you're done, those people might hang around like I'm a Survivor fan, and they get voted off and they're still around.
Yeah, and I
We,
hope that happens. I hope that we have that's certainly a great point. I really want participants, if they decide to drop out of the race, I do want them to stay around and see what's going to happen, and to give their assessment of what happened to them. Why it didn't work out for them, and talking about the ability to be able to communicate with them, during kind of their land time during that hour. I think that's going to be another bit of maybe mind game that's going to play with a lot of racers. This is not something that a lot of people prepare for when they race, which is having to constantly restart, having to constantly think ahead about what they're going to do at other hours. What's the hour that they're going to take in the most nutrition? When's the hour that they decide that they're going to paddle faster so that they can sleep longer, and things like that. Those are going to be things that are just going to be fascinating to watch unfold, and they're going to be different for each racer. And so even though everybody's in this controlled setting and in this one small little area, it's going to be lots of little individual races happening within this one big race. And so, spoiler alert, I don't think it's a big surprise, but I am planning to live stream it throughout the race. And so, that's going to be really cool, because people that don't get the opportunity to come to Sarasota for whatever reason will be able to get a feel for what's going on day and night throughout the race. And that's going to be interesting for me, because that'll be the first time that I've put on a race where we've had basically just a live stream going for potentially days. So that's going to be kind of a cool way to watch it. And I think too, the other thing that's really neat about it is this is not a race about having 200 people do it. And in some ways, having 200 racers do it would not be as good an event as it is with a smaller number of racers. We get to actually follow along and kind of get invested in who each one of them is and what they're going through. And maybe even, some people might, be specifically for certain racers because they are seeing them suffer, hour after hour. And that's easier when you have a smaller number of people doing it. But even if the race started today with the 25 people that are signed up, it's you know, it's a super, super good class of racers for this first year.
Yeah, great. We do have a question about where you can follow the live stream. Will it be on Facebook or?
Yeah, we're going to do Facebook Live on the Last Paddler Standing page, and possibly on another media outlet as well that maybe has a little bit bigger following than Last Paddler Standing. But yeah, it'll be a Facebook Live.
That's wonderful. Exciting. So 25, like you said, a wonderful number, but hey, there's a lot of paddlers in Florida and areas surrounding that could still sign up and still get there. So I hope some of this description is helping motivate some people. Maybe some of those, they probably need to focus on Chattajack, which is next weekend, but who love that longer type of thing. They have plenty of time to recover.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about Chattajack is I'm actually 2 hours from there, so I'm going up there as well.
Oh,
and
great.
if anybody's at Chattajack and they want, I'll be wearing Last Paddler Standing stuff. So if they have questions, they can come up to me. I'll be happy to answer any of them.
Very cool. Good to know. Yeah. Zach was another name I saw from a family, a father-son that both paddle a lot down in the South. So he's not coming from too far away, but that's cool. Paolo, I had not noticed that his name showed up. Great guy. Just saw him in Europe. Again, a top younger racer. We've got Packet Casey. How are you? I haven't seen you in forever. Who was a really early OG in stand-up paddle racing in the South. So, well, he was all over, but so definitely some more possibilities, I think, out there. So I would love to see that number grow a little bit, just because I think that opportunity to test yourself that you pointed out is a really different way of looking at it. And I hope that will encourage more people to maybe give it a try right from the start. But
yeah, I mean, I'm going to have registration open all the way till the week of the race. And so there's an opportunity certainly for people that are doing Chattajack to come out of that race and make a decision after that. But you're right. I mean, I think that, you know, I think somewhere in that 40 to 50 person range is certainly is certainly very doable and a quality first year race for something that, quite frankly, most people have no real idea of what it's going to be like for them. And so I think that would be pretty awesome.
yeah, well, there are a lot of questions, and that's part of the excitement and interest in all of this. But I'd love to get some tips from you kind of about having your experience, because you are experienced at these ultras in a different modality, but about how you prepare, about what type of equipment, and maybe it's what you think people will be doing or what you would do if you were doing it. What kind of equipment, like you said, there's a lot of choices to be made. What kind of equipment do you think we're going to see? Give us some thoughts on those things.
Yeah, so if we're just talking equipment for a second here, I think we're going to see all kinds of boards. I think we're going to see hard boards. I think we're going to see some inflatables. In fact, the board sponsor for the race is Easter Sup out of Sweden, and we're actually going to have one of their 17-foot inflatables at the race that is there for somebody to use if they would like to use it.
Okay, so you can switch equipment during.
No, you got to commit to whatever it is. So if somebody were to contact me and say, I want to do your race and I'd like to use your inflatable 17-foot, they would be able to use that. But you're correct. You have to declare your one board at the beginning of the race, and that's the one board that you're on the entire time. But yes, I think we're going to see a combination. Again, because I think what's really interesting is at least within the first 48 hours, being on the fastest board is not necessarily a benefit. And I don't want to give away sort of all the strategy and secret sauce here, but I think that's a pretty obvious thing, which is just because you finish the loop fast doesn't necessarily mean that you have an advantage in a race like this. And so I think that's sort of, if I were sitting here listening to this, that's something that I would sort of keep in mind when planning for the race. You know, if you're talking just in general about endurance strategy, I think that one of the things that has benefited me and has benefited friends of mine that oftentimes see being something that people overlook is, oftentimes when we're training for endurance sports, we tend to train in like the best conditions. So we try to make sure that we're going when the temperature is right, or when it's a sunny day and not rainy, or when it's a little warmer instead of freezing cold and things like that. And what happens in a lot of instances is we get to race day and those are not the conditions we've trained in. And so, and races don't just not happen because it's not a perfect day. And so I think it's really important if you're doing a long ultra event of any kind, that you put yourself through the suffering way before race day, that you go out there in the rain, you go out there in the cold and the snow and in the 100-degree heat and all the things that are uncomfortable. And then those are immediately not factors negatively for you on race day. The other thing that's pretty big is a lot of people only train during daylight, and then they get to something and they are not used to overnight. They're not used to what that does to the senses, or what it does to, just their body in general in terms of sleep deprivation and things like that. And so it's important to train that way as well. It's important to get out there at night if you're doing something that very possibly will take you into the night. You should train like that. And so I think that's sort of one of the, probably I'd say, of my years of doing endurance events, I think that's probably one of the things that is most beneficial is just get out of your comfort zone well before race day.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. And boy, Mother Nature is the big unpredictable factor. So trying out different things. It is in Florida. I'd love to go back. The venue, actually, we mentioned Nathan Benderson Park in Sarasota, but it's a Olympic training center for rowing, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
that's correct.
Very, like you said, control, but that does not mean, you can't control, again, the weather and what that's going to be. Florida, yes, we can look at, charts and predictions and that kind of thing. Hey, there's Brendan Prince just joined us, who's one of the participants. Hey, Brendan, we were talking about you and many of the other 25 who are already signed up for Last Paddler Standing. But you've done what you can. You've put it in as controlled an environment as it can be. And it's not right out on the bay. It's its own man-made, I believe, water.
Yeah.
Is that right? But yeah, you need to be prepared for everything. And I'd never really thought about the nighttime thing, but yeah, you need to know what it feels like and how you react to it and how your senses deal with pitch dark.
Yeah, and I mean, even the park itself does have some, ancillary lights around. There's actually a walking track that goes around the park and is one of the ways that we'll be able to monitor racers throughout the race. But yes, it is as controlled as it could possibly be for a race like this, which is important. You do want it to be, you do want to, in a lot of ways, take the actual venue out of the equation as much as possible and truly get it down to the bare bones of the person themselves, and everything else is as impact and least impactful as possible, I guess is the best way to say it. And so it is a perfect venue for that. You're right, it is one of the Olympic rowing and dragon boat destinations that a lot of people go to. I will say there are some alligators in there, so that's kind of important to keep in mind for anybody that's not used to them. As somebody who puts on a long distance race in Alabama where we have a lot of alligators, I do want to just say that alligators are not really an issue, and the paddlers are not going to be allowed to take any food with them on the board, and that would be the primary reason why. So, I don't have any concerns, but there are things within the water that exist that will make it a little bit more interesting.
That is very interesting. It's funny. I see James here has the shock face, but I know where he lives and we have sharks in the water out here. So we have other things too that make other people nervous that aren't usually in our waters. So that is definitely an issue, but not an issue, but good to know, I guess. Good information to have ahead of time. Linda's making the same face. So alligators do give people pause, but they are the least aggressive of all those. The big ones are the more docile ones. I've always heard that what are the little ones called that are in like Central America? Cayman, I think.
Oh, you're talking about like the caiman, the
Yeah.
crocodile.
Yeah, the little crocodiles are supposed to be super aggressive, but like that's what you need to be more
Yeah,
worried about.
these gators don't really want anything to do with you. And but it's always, it's maybe a little bit of fun to get people a little nervous about it, but it's actually not anything to be concerned about.
Not a big deal. Well, you talked about with the Great Alabama 650 that it's actually this water trail that kind of sponsored it and it's part of it. Was there anything that brought you down to Florida, or did you just said, oh, this is a perfect venue for what I want to do?
No, it's totally me putting this on, and I mean, the truth is I'm taking an existing concept in trail running and I'm putting it on the water. And so, so if anybody out there is a trail runner or an ultra runner, they will have probably heard of the backyard ultras, which is basically this exact same thing. And the only difference is that it's now on water, and so, I was really, more than anything, the reason to be in Sarasota was the park, was just having this controlled setting where we could, where everybody could very easily be able to be off water and on water and not have any sort of outside distractions as much as we possibly can. It is a public park, so at the end of the day, there might be somebody out there rowing at some point during the race, and that's just part of it. But as controlled as you could possibly get it, that's what I wanted. And so, yeah, it's all me putting it on. My company, Rome Projects, is what's putting it on. But yeah, nobody's really intentionally been bringing me in for it. But I will say that the Visit Sarasota group down there, the tourism people, are very much behind this and have been promoting it as one of the big events coming to Sarasota. Just like when U.S. Dragon Boat or U.S. Rowing is coming to town, they're treating this in the same vein because it is something unique and it's something that they get that nobody else has. And so they're definitely excited to see it coming to town.
Well, I think you might be the first, big SUP event to be there, but I do want to mention that it is going to be a big location in the future. The ICF in 24, so a little ways off, but is having their world championship there for stand-up paddleboarding. So they have already, jumped in, and maybe you helped bring their attention to stand-up paddleboarding. I'm not sure, but definitely adding that to the different paddlecraft that have had events and are going to have events, because they've had some really, really big ones there. Love the backyard ultra reference, because what a great thing for people in this event or interested in the event to study and look and see how it's done in running, because I'm sure there are many lessons to be learned about that. And your company, loves the name Rome Projects. Is that an acronym, or I mean, there's a lot of meaning in there, or just because you move around where you have your events? How'd you name
that? That's the exact reason. It's because there's lots of moving around and doing things all over, and just the simple loving of the concept of the word Rome, to sort of not be stuck in one spot, but to sort of adapt and move around. And I also do other things other than the race directing as well. Everything is within the outdoor recreation sphere, but I have multiple projects going on during the year, and it just so happens that now I'm going to have 2 major paddle races that are occurring as well.
So do you guide adventure travel as part of the title, I know too? Do you take people on adventures?
I do. I take people to Albania every year for a trail. It's like a trail running and hiking tour of the Albanian Alps.
Wow.
Which is this amazing area of Europe that is still relatively untouched, but the mountains are beautiful and the trails are gnarly, and it's just the people are great, is fantastic. So every May I take anywhere from 6 to 8 people on a hut-to-hut style
Oh, cool.
run and hike through the Alps, and then I also do a lot of sort of like the 3-day weekend style adventure trips, primarily for tourism boards in areas where they're trying to grow attention for what they may have on offer. So lots of things like pack rafting trips and bike packing trips and trail running trips and things like that. Those are all fall under room projects as well.
Oh, wonderful. Those sound like fantastic opportunities. And thank you for having something like this and having a creative mind that has included stand-up paddleboarding and other paddleboards, of course, and paddlecraft in the other event. But this one is really going to be something special. I hope that, again, like you said, you already have a great group, and it's going to be fantastic if it's just them. But I'm hoping some people might hear this and decide to join, whether they're feeling competitive, like I can do that, and I can be that last person standing, or if they just want to check it out and try it out and challenge themselves and see how far they can go or set a goal for themselves. What a great opportunity.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you hit it on the head right there. I mean, I think that this is more than anything, I just want to give a new opportunity within this area of paddling, and I think that that's what excites me. I mean, it's really easy to go create the same kind of race that somebody else is doing. It's maybe a little bit harder in paddling just because access to water is surprisingly not as easy from a racing standpoint as a lot of people might think. And so, but it's way more enjoyable to create something that is exciting and a little more unique. And so I really hope people want to come be a part of it, primarily because they're going to be the first ones to get to be a part of something like this. And who knows, we may see other sort of similar races pop up around the world as a result of this. And I've had conversations with people about that. And so we might see that starts to pop up in other areas as well. And that certainly occurred within the backyard ultra world. So I could see it happening within the stand-up world as well. But, I definitely am excited that we're going to be the first and hopefully the best. And so anybody who wants to be a part of that, this is the year to do it.
It's the year to do it. And you have this amazing man, Greg Wingo, leading it all and creating it. Again, it's been exciting for me just already to watch the build up and see who you've got on board. And be sure, everyone, to it's going to be live, but to catch up now and follow on Instagram, Last Paddler Standing, the Greg Wingo. Do you have a website or Facebook? You said you have a page also for Last Paddler Standing? Yeah,
they're all Last Paddler Standing. So all the social is Last Paddler Standing. The website is lastpaddlerstanding.com. Registration takes you to Paddle Guru, which if you're trying to do it today, I think Paddle Guru is actually having some technical difficulties today. So I probably should just let you know that. But lastpaddlerstanding.com has all the information and the race rules and things like that. I didn't even touch on lots of the different sort of the rules that are involved with the race. But yeah, it's all there. And so I would say give Paddle Guru maybe 24 hours to get it together and then sign up.
Great. And thank you for putting it on that platform. Hopefully people have seen it. If you came in late, it starts December 3rd. So you still have time. We still have quite a few weeks before we get there. And it's going to be an amazing event. Excited to meet you and talk to you about this and your other adventures. And you're going to be someone to follow because I think you've created something really cool. Like you said, maybe it will even branch off and become a thing in other places too. So thank you again. Good luck. And I'm excited that I'm actually not going to be competing, but going to be a part of it and get to be one of your commentators. And I also appreciate that you are having more than one so that you can sleep.
That's right. No, that's a good point, which is, and I'm excited to have you there and some of the other commentators there as well. And I think that, that's one thing that we're going to do a little bit more different is we're going to be bringing in paddlers as they are quitting the race. We're going to have them in talking about what that experience was like. And so it'll be really interesting for everybody to sort of hear what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Greg. Have a wonderful
Thank
day.
you.
Always great. And thanks everybody who listened. What an interesting event. And you're an interesting guy. Oh, James wants to know if you need photographers. He lives here in California.
Come on
Again,
out.
this will be on IGTV, and then it's recorded and it goes on to YouTube after that. So if anybody missed it and wants to hear more about it, we did get requests to talk more about gators, but we'll be talking about gators at the event, I'm sure. But don't worry about them. Thank you again for your time and appreciate what you're doing. Great stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.